First of all, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I won't bore you with my very early years, but I think it really, first of all, started with a substantial amount of time spent at art school. I was at 7 years at art school, the Royal College of Art in London, and what followed was BBC as a designer, because I was trained as a designer, not as a director. And during that process, somewhere in there, I found time to make a half-hour movie, which was paid for by the British Film Institute and partly the Royal College of Art. Very low budget, I may add. At the time, it was £65, which is about 120 bucks. And my star and chief equipment carrier was my brother, Tony Scott, who you're also all quite familiar with, who made quite a few movies, interesting movies that you are aware of. The BBC was followed by a career in advertising because I discovered that at this particular moment in time, there were no real direct routes into feature films. And it was a tough path to go through. And therefore I discovered advertising, I discovered commercials for both cinema and for television. And I climbed into that, left BBC, and then devoted what was almost the next 15 years of my life to television commercial directing. In that process, of course, for me, it was the ultimate film school. Short sections of movie, but produced with maximum technique, technology, which incorporate, and communication. So I found out about cutting, lighting, editing, etc., etc. After the 15-year period, I realized that I really ought to start thinking about the next natural step, which would be feature films. And I started to, in fact, develop feature films for myself in hope of actually carrying them to Hollywood and going through the usual process of becoming financed and making movies. The first movie, of course, was The Duelists. And whilst it was considered an art film, it really opened the door for me in Hollywood because they all liked it, but they didn't know how to release it. And from then I just moved forward without any much problem. My route then was, from The Duelists was Alien, Blade Runner, Legend, Someone to Watch Over Me, Black Rain, and then Thelma and Louise. And really, Thelma and Louise for me, if you look at that list of fairly exotic movies and covering exotic situations and exotic characters, I felt I needed to step off the perception of what I was as a director, and because I really was becoming pigeonholed. And I felt that I need to emphasize and do a film really more about people-driven story, character-driven story. This script, written by Callie Curry, passed through the hands of my production company and had been floating around for a while. One or two people had looked at it, one or two studios had looked at it, but basically the perception at that particular point was, to quote the studio executive, what is this about? It's two bitches in a car, right? And I just saw what to do with it. I found both characters enormously appealing. I'm not really, or shouldn't really be considered as a feminist director, and yet this script was a feminist subject, and that in itself, all directors are looking for new departures, because here I was as a male director considering a female subject. I had cast a woman for what would be considered very much a male part in Alien, so the tip of the iceberg was already there. People were beginning to look at me saying, here's a director who supports the process of female equality, in a nutshell, to keep it really simple. Here was a real extension of that. Here was a real opportunity to explore two female characters in depth. The tone of the script, upon which we did, a fair amount of development and adjustment, but always with Callie. I had an extremely good relationship with Callie Curry, who, because she's a female, used to take me through it blow by blow as a female to a male, and basically used to give me my daily lectures. And I took it mainly because she's right. She was absolutely right. So by the time I was ready to do this film, I figured I was fairly prepared to answer most of the questions from two actresses that I know would be asking a lot of questions. So Thelma as a script could have been handled in two ways. You could have gone the direction of, let's say, choose a good movie, which is serious, Silkwood. You could have gone down the route of Silkwood about female characters, albeit, of course, about a totally different subject. But tonally, you could have gone down that route, and I think it would have become too serious. It would have become too documentary, which I know at one stage I think Callie was kind of angling in that kind of direction, saying, well, why not? And I'm saying because I think it can also be fun. And if it's fun, then it can reach a much bigger audience. And after all, that's what movies are about. Movies are not a cheap medium. Movies are an expensive medium. And therefore, part of my target is to get as many bums on seats as possible. And, because this business is also about commerce, and people forget that. So part of the director's job, from my point of view, is giving the studio their cake and eating it, but me also getting my cake and eating it. In other words, I have to have my performance in this movie as well. My performance is everything that you see on the screen. The actors, the words, but then behind it, it's the blue sign, it's the light, it's the movement of the crowd, it's how much smoke dare I allow in this room without one more critic saying, here's the director who uses too much smoke. Because to me, it's the proscenium for the actors. And it's my job to make that proscenium as real as possible. And that also comes even if you're in the great outdoors. And what I felt was that this film, by definition, was the last journey, in parenthesis, and therefore should be seen as that. That view of it should be, as the film evolves, should it become more majestic, more memorable, because it's two figures moving through this landscape to their own demise. And therefore, that was my, let's say, romantic overview on the film, and the way of raising this film from being about two girls in a car into something which was a little bit more of a statement. As a director, you go through the process when you begin. If you didn't do directing school or acting school, which neither myself nor my contemporaries at that time, like Parker, like Adrian Lyne, then Tony, and Hugh Hudson, we had no experience at all with actors, other than what we gradually gathered during the process of making television commercials. So it became a learning process while you're doing it. You learn to articulate what your requirements are. And I gradually found, not quickly, took a while, but I realized that I found, first of all, that I'm a good casting person. I cast well, albeit with a casting agent. But the bottom line is I make the choices, right? And therefore I found that my choices over the years were pretty good. And the better the choice, the better the actor or actress, then a lot of my problems in that area for that particular character were over on the day, and because they would be taking care of business for me in that corner of the room. And so that gave me room to address everything else in more detail. And so gradually I realized that really this is it. You don't cast a person and assume that they have no creative ability. The best actresses go home and they goddamn work on it. They come in with some solutions and ideas, and therefore I found that for me, and I do now find for me, the best relationship I can hold with any actor, any thespian, is it's a partnership. It's very much a partnership. It's an exchange of ideas where they'll say, what about this? And I'll say, yeah, that's terrific. Or what about that? And so you come to a solution before you get onto the floor. Once you're on that floor, everybody knows what they're doing. And then this is why this film moved like lightning. It went by like that. And at the end of it, everybody was disappointed because everybody's having a good time, I found that, again, we cast well, or Lou DeGiamo cast well, put good people in front of me. And so I was able to say this one, this one, this one. And so it really flowed easily. And therefore, I find, for me, I am more of a barometer of their talent, of the people I choose to be in my movie. I become a barometer of what they can do. So I may, in simple terms, say up a bit, down a bit, faster or slower. But for the most part, keep it simple, because the better the actor, very often they know what the target is and they don't want to hear their reasons why, because you've discussed that, you've hit the mark, and also the script has said why, right? This process that I've now discovered for me in relation to actors gives me, therefore, more time to keep up the other side of my performance, which is, particularly when a film gets really complex, it's very easy to drop the ball or get lazy or just get swamped on the process of how that film looks. And how that film looks is a lot of detail. There's a lot of perseverance. There's a lot of pre-thoughts. For instance, these cars and trucks on the road here, that could be just headlights in an inky screen. And so we worked out beforehand that we would have traveling vehicles behind where the vehicle headlights would be pumped up. So in effect, we'll have moving lights which will light the wide shots of the trucks, right? Because I wanted even the highway shots to be kind of beautiful. I attend to all details. That's my art directing background. I was accused at one point early in my career of it getting in the way because the films were so visual. And I used to take that to heart, only temporarily, because I quickly realized, well, wait a minute, it's a visual medium. That's what we're talking pictures, pal, right? The story under the bridge here, for instance, the truck passing, the car stopping, ought to be moody but not black, you know, and I wanted to be, and because I'm English, coming to the United States, I've never got over the glitter of new equipment, of clean cars, clean roads. That is Americana, and I wanted this to be a very American film. The shot at the end, again, it's part of the mood of the film in a way. It's a film noir. On the surface, it started off as being humorous, even a comedy. And there will still be moments which are charming or witty, which comes from the two characters and the predicament of the two characters. But seeing Louise, for the moment, they're fragile in that situation was, very important, that I must move in on Louise sitting on her own in that cafe, because again, it's still mother-daughter. I know in a certain kind of movie where, of course, I'm now being influenced by rock videos and television commercials because I'm still very much in it. I now see there's a new visual dialogue developing, which, of course, I latch onto because I love it. I don't like rooms that are brightly lit. In fact, the room we're sitting in right now is actually quite nicely lit. White walls, the light comes through the natural sources and it's not dazzling. I hate top light, unless I'm doing a scene in an abattoir or in a medical room. I tend to see life this way, which it is. Light is beautiful, and it's whether you recognize that or not. And I just use light the way I see it. I think part of my brain as a cinematographer, that's why I like to operate still after all this time. It's easier to have another operator, but I think, and in fact on this film, there were always two cameras working, because I now have developed a process of where I work two cameras always pretty well. Julius was one camera, Alien was all one camera, so I operated on that. Blade Runner was in Hollywood, so that became one camera, but with a wonderful cameraman called Jordan Cronenworth, and his crew, who were absolutely ace, top of the line. Then Legend, I went back and I was operating on Legend with Peter MacDonald. In other words, I discovered I love the process, and the magic goes through the viewfinder. The viewfinder, I discovered, is the proscenium. And through that proscenium, everything is shut out except for what I'm looking at, which is the actor's face in close-up, or a landscape, or a medium shot. And therefore, I know when I've got it, or I know when and how to adjust it if it's not quite working. Going into a dark room, which is his little hole in the wall, I just love that juxtaposition of sunlight against shadow. Storyboards are a very key factor in the way I work. I storyboard everything. I start off with a blank page and simply begin to draw. Once I'm halfway through the first frame, the whole scene is starting to open up in my head, and I just draw the whole thing down. The film I'm doing right now, I Am Legend, which is a big kind of futuristic thing. There's going to be so many boards and pictures that I now do thumbnails and then hand them to a sophisticated storyboard artist who will then embellish them and draw them up accurately, because they also become blueprint, they become information. It's not for me that I can walk in a scene really and just pick it up and shoot it on the spot. The storyboards in certain kinds of films are then Xeroxed and handed to a first AD, to cameramen, to prop department, to people who are key personnel who take a look at it and see where they're going to come into it. And so I'm playing around with visuals with a pencil. So by the time I get to the camera, I've gone through it in paper, it's coming together in the camera. So that is a hugely important and useful preparation.